Welcome to A Window on Sahmri, where we take you inside South Australia's independent not-for-profit health and medical research institute. Each episode, we get to know the people driving our life-changing research, getting into what motivates them personally and how their work is delivering a brighter, healthier future for all.
How are scientists misunderstood?
I think from speaking with friends and when I first meet people, and they seem quite surprised that I'm a scientist because they've got this perception in their head that we're kind of socially awkward, nerdy, don't know how to have a conversation, don't know how to have a laugh. So I think it's more that people perceive scientists as being quite boring, whereas I don't see us as being that way at all.
What way do you see scientists being?
Oh, the ones I've worked with are a lot of fun and they've become my friends outside of the lab environment. Yeah, just like anyone else.
Why do you think there is that perception?
I think the way that we're portrayed on screen would probably have a lot to do with it. So like shows like The Big Bang Theory, that would be a particular type of scientist, but the like wet lab research-based ones are pretty fun to be around.
Just don't get a good rap.
No, we don't.
Why is science more of a lifestyle than a career?
So I'd say that being a research scientist is a lifestyle because like you just have to live and breathe your research. So for example, in the past, I'll be out for a run or riding my bike and an idea will pop into my head or I'll think, hang on, maybe that analysing the data that way, that would be better.
Is that often when it happens, when you're not necessarily focusing on it?
Yeah. I guess my mind is constantly ticking over with new results that I've got or something that literature that I've read. I know other colleagues, they keep a notebook by their bed for if they happen to wake up and have an epiphany.
Does that ever happen to you?
I can't say it's happened from sleep, but definitely more exercise based when I'm just, zoning out. Something will pop into my head and I have in the past stopped and written it down in my phone. In terms of that, constantly thinking about it, that's pretty lifestyle driven, and the commitment that's taken to be a research scientist, like the sacrifice, the late nights, weekends, sometimes doing work on holidays if there's a particular deadline that's coming up. Yeah, like devoting a big portion of your life and your brain to it.
So does it feel like you have to live for it to be successful?
In this age, yes. So if you're not that way, you're unlikely to be successful because there's plenty of other people who are, and they will be the ones that are more competitive for the grant funding.
Was that your expectation when you got into this career?
Probably not. I don't recall that ever being said to me at uni or by teachers in high school. So no, it's something that I probably wasn't as prepared for. But at the same time, if I didn't do this, I'm not sure what else I'd do. Like it is a passion of mine. It's something that I feel really strongly about. I enjoy what I do. Yeah, I get to wake up and enjoy my job, and I don't think that's something that the majority of people would say.
Yeah, you can't take that for granted. Why did you become a cancer researcher?
I never wanted to focus on cancer specifically, but I always knew that I wanted my research to be translated into helping people. So, and I do work in what's called a translational research lab. So the discoveries that we make in the laboratory are directly translated into improving patient care. So I'm curious, but I didn't want to just find something out for the sake of finding it out. I wanted my knowledge gained from the experiments to be translated to helping people.
And how did you get to the point where you're focusing solely on cancer, or what inspired you to work in that field?
Well, I did. After my undergraduate degree, I did an honours year, and that was in HIV research. And I could have continued with that, but I'm not sure. That wasn't for me. And then I was applying for jobs, and one in my current laboratory came up, and I applied for that and was successful. And it was in leukemia research, so that field ticked the box of the research being to help people.
Any personal connection to cancer?
Not leukemia, but I've had relatives pass away from more solid tumours. But that wasn't a real driving factor. It was more I wanted to work on diseases. And I have found a passion for the leukemia research that I do.
and acute lymphoblastic leukemia largely affects children. What impact is there because of that element for you?
It's always fairly confronting when we receive patient samples in the laboratory from really young children. So we've had several from babies, and recently becoming a mother myself, it's really driven home like what those parents must go through when they get that diagnosis. So it kind of drives me even more now to, when we're analysing the patient data, to do it quickly, do it accurately, so you can get the results off to the clinician, so you can let that child have the best chance of recovery.
So it does cross your mind when you're in the lab and you're working really hard that you're doing it for children who are really sick?
Oh yeah, all the time. Like you just think, oh, a late night, but I've got to get this done because any delay could impact the outcome of that little child.
So sort of a lot of pressure to put on yourself. I totally understand how you make that jump and think of it that way, and that inspires you to do what you do, but it must feel like there's a lot on the line all the time.
Yeah, but you kind of get used to it. Like there's always, if it's not getting the patient results out, it's an impending deadline. So you kind of, as a research scientist, I've kind of gotten used to there always being something that you need to get done.
And since just having a child of your own, how has that impacted the work you do generally, and especially in seeing other very young children who are ill and now having a child of your own?
It's just something more tangible. Before being a parent, I always knew it was important, but having that personal, tangible link now, it's just kind of amplified the passion and drive that I have for what I do.
And your work largely focuses on finding alternative therapies that are more effective and have less side effects. What's been the Eureka moment of your career so far, of the best moments?
One was, I say reasonably recently, but I forget, I've had like almost a year out of the lab. So I discovered that a drug that's used in a different type of leukemia can be repurposed for a particular subtype of acute lymphoblastic leukemia.
So a drug that's already on the market?
Yeah, and that's really important because that drug has already gone through clinical trials. It's been shown that there's limited toxicity in patients. So it's already gone through all the rigorous testing.
Rather than a new drug, which might take 10 years to get to that point.
Exactly. Yeah, so the discovery that I've made can be more rapidly translated into the clinic because it's just switching the purpose of a drug rather than finding a whole new drug.
And how much more effective has that drug proven to be?
It's at least as effective as a different drug that's currently used in this subtype of leukemia, but importantly, it's not as toxic, so the patients aren't going to experience as severe side effects. And yeah, that was a real Eureka moment. I didn't actually believe the results. So I got some data back, analysed it, and I was just like, hang on, what?
Sort of like a lottery ticket where you're double checking it?
Yeah. And then we repeated it twice more in two different models and got the same results.
Because I imagine with trial and error, there's so many times where it doesn't work, but that's what you're used to.
Exactly. Yeah, I was just like, hang on, something's worked the first time.
And were you by yourself when you had that moment?
I was with my research assistant. So yeah, I showed her and she's like, what? And had the same reaction as me. And then it's just that like wave of excitement that comes over you and you think, hang on, I've like discovered something important that's going to help patients.
What does that mean to you? That's something that few people get to experience, creating something like that that's going to potentially impact all of humanity in a really positive way.
I'm not sure I've ever considered that, like the knock-on effects. It makes me really proud that, yeah, I've discovered something that will benefit a lot of people.
And I suppose it's great to be able to have some stuff to hang your hat on because it's pretty thankless work a lot of the time, and there's long periods that I've heard are very frustrating, and there's a lot of blood, sweat and tears that's put into it. So when you have a moment like that, it must mean all the more because of that.
Well, it's kind of the little, I don't know, like candy that you need to keep going.
Yeah.
The lemonade instead of the lemons.
And I think when people who aren't involved in science think about a scientist and what a scientist would need to be successful, we think high IQ and an analytical mind and someone who's probably a bit introverted, like you mentioned before. But what about stubborn persistence and unwavering dedication?
Yeah, those are probably the two key characteristics of my own characteristics that I would say are what make me successful. So it's the dogged grit and the stubborn determination.
Yeah. Why is that so necessary?
Oh, you just get knocked down so much. Like a lot of what you see on, say, Twitter, for example, of people sharing the great news that they have been successful in an application, no one's going to share the 5 that came before it that were unsuccessful. I guess it's like Instagram. You see like a shiny...
The highlight reel.
Yeah, a highlight reel of people that you think are successful, and they don't share just how much has gone into that.
But every researcher knows how hard it is.
Yeah, on some level we do, but it just seems sometimes you're like, oh, that person's got like 3 grants in a row, but they've probably applied for 20.
How does that influence the way that you reflect on yourself? Can that make either you or some of the younger scientists that you mentor doubt themselves and think that perhaps they're not up to standard or their work's not as important as they might have believed it was? Is there a lot of second guessing as a result of it being so hard to win grants and only 10% of those being successful?
Yeah, like speaking from my own personal experience, absolutely. There's a lot of imposter syndrome that goes around, and I have suffered from it, still do. You think, why should I even be competitive in this? I do try and give the students that I mentor a more realistic idea of what it is like being a research scientist, because I think that's important, not to go into it thinking it's all happy days.
And Eureka moments.
Yeah. So, yeah, like you do need to realise that they need to realise that it's a hard gig, but it is extremely rewarding.
And difficult not to take it personally.
Yeah. It like sometimes the reviewers I don't think even get your name. So you're hopefully just judged on the research that you've proposed, and it just depends on the time, I guess, and the other applicants in the pool, because there have been times that I've been super competitive and have won 2 fellowships from the one application submitted around the same time, and then the next year haven't been competitive at all. So yeah, it's not personal, and I haven't changed how I've achievements that I've done throughout the different years. It's just the luck of the draw sometimes.
What have you done to work against that imposter syndrome?
Well, you do when you get a rejection email. You do kind of just need to sit in it for a day, half a day, but not dwell on it for too long. And then, just pick yourself up and keep going. You do need to have, while I say that research is a lifestyle, you do need to have outside interests as well. So I've always used exercise to distract me. That releases endorphins and makes you feel good as well. So, I'd encourage having outside interests.
Have you seen it be too much for other scientists where they can't cope with the pressure of it all anymore and give that line of work away?
I'm not sure if it's... Yes, I have seen good scientists leave the industry. I'm not sure it's because they can't hack it anymore. I don't think that's the case. It's more that they're thinking, oh, well, what's the point? Why would I put myself through all of this? And maybe they didn't have the same the same degree of passion. Yeah, I was counting up of the friends that I had during undergraduate university. I'm pretty much the only one still left in research.
Wow.
Yeah, like people have gone on to work in government or industry, teachers, and one's left the science altogether.
When has your work brought you to tears?
It's usually when personal life spills over into professional life. I feel like those 2 lives, if one is not going as well as the other, then you're still able to cope. But when both are pretty crap, that's when work would probably bring me to tears, because you just don't have that as much resilience within you to, I don't know, keep going after a failed experiment or a grant rejection.
So there's that build-up of pressure on all sides.
Yeah, definitely.
What's got you through those moments?
Funnily enough, it's throwing myself into work. So focusing on, there was a couple of moments during my PhD that I kind of had a bit of a meltdown, and then just focusing on the thesis writing and getting more experiments. That got me through. Planning holidays, that always helps.
Why does it help to throw yourself into work?
I guess just because there's that end goal, and very goal oriented. So achieving that goal quicker would make me feel good.
Do you pick this up happening in some of the scientists that you mentor, and can you speak to them and talk them through it? Is that part of the mentorship that you offer people?
Yeah. So offering support if you can see they're having a tough time, advising to maybe focus on a different aspect of their research, because it's not often that you just have one single line of research. There's always something else you could pick up, and that is especially helpful if that line of research isn't going so well and you're just hitting dead end after a dead end.
You feel like you're banging your head on a brick wall sort of thing.
Yeah, so we advise to keep your fingers in more pies, I guess.
And the survival rate for ALL has increased from 4% for children to 85% or around that. How has that been possible?
Largely through better treatments. So there's been a revolution, I guess, in next generation sequencing, and that's identified, and by next generation sequencing, I mean sequencing the leukemia of the patient, finding out exactly what is causing that leukemia to happen, because in ALL it's a very diverse range of mutations that cause the disease to arise. So doing sequencing to determine what different patients' disease is caused by has better allowed the targeted treatment of that disease. So say if one person has a particular protein that's causing a mutated protein that's causing their disease, but someone else has a fusion gene, you wouldn't want to treat them the same way. So the targeted treating of patients' individual diseases has helped the survival rate to get so much better.
But through so much health research, we're now at a stage where we're seeing these cancers go from being a death sentence to being more like a chronic condition. So it must feel like there is progress. It's slow, but it's not like it's stalled.
No, there's incremental progress, definitely, and some leukemias are seen as more of a chronic illness. With acute lymphoblastic leukemia, yes, the 5-year survival rate has increased to the statistics you said, but there's still the threat of relapse disease. So that's when a patient the disease will rebound and they'll need to undergo more treatment. And I think that is still a major leading cause of death in non-traumatic death in children. So it's while great strides have been made, there's still a lot of work to do, because if they've lost response to one particular treatment, we want to be able to offer an alternate treatment that's still going to have an effect.
Yeah, it's so complex, and there's so many elements to not just the one phase, but multiple phases as well. And cancer's capacity to adapt to treatments must be incredibly frustrating to break through some plateau or feel like you've solved the problem only for it to mutate and change. But I guess the point that I think we're both making is that it is still tracking in the right direction, but it's not like you find the answer and that's it.
And it's over, no. Yeah, definitely tracking in the right direction.
And you're the Peter Nelson Leukemia Research Fellow at Sahmri. What does that allow you to do?
So that has provided salary funding for me for, it was 3 years funding, and that's allowed me to focus on the research. So I don't have to worry about where my salary is coming from, so I can focus on doing what a scientist should be doing, the experiments.
How good has that been?
Oh, that's been wonderful. Yeah, I was really pleased and thankful that I was awarded that funding. And I know Marjorie Jackson Nelson, she just works tirelessly to raise that funding.
What's that meant for your research, just being able to focus on research, which so many other researchers would love to be able to do because they're spending most of their time applying for grants and trying to fund it. So you getting into that rare position where you could just do what you love to do, how has that been different to what your past experience has been?
Yeah, it is a never-ending treadmill, I guess, of applying for a grant, getting it or getting the rejection and then having to apply again and again and again. So stepping off that treadmill and knowing that you have secure salary funding for 3-5 years, whatever the fellowship may provide, it just allows your brain to kind of focus and have space to focus on the big research questions that you're asking. And for me, being able to do that, I've mapped out where I want to be. So in 5-10 years' time, what do I want to have accomplished? Where do I want to be? As well as amassing data.
Can you tell us what that is?
Sure. I would like to establish myself as the national leader in T-cell acute lymphoblastic leukemia genomics, and then using laboratory modelling to replicate a patient's disease, using laboratory modelling to replicate a patient's disease so that should they relapse, I will have tested alternative therapies for them so that I can then create a sort of armory of alternative targeted therapies that clinicians will be able to pick from to treat patients.
Do you think that's where cancer treatment needs to go for all kinds of different cancers, where there's, like you said, an armory, there's a whole lot of different options, and that's sort of the best way forward?
I think so. Most cancers are definitely moving towards the precision medicine treatment. So not having one drug to treat all patients, irrespective of what sort of disease they've got, but having rationally chosen therapies to treat that patient's particular disease. And then should that patient start responding to that treatment, have another one ready to go.
It's a big vision. For the other researchers who don't have a fellowship like the one that you're currently on, they have to find the money elsewhere. Why are fundraising events like the Sahmri Bright Walk so important to them?
So there's kind of like I think it's termed the Valley of Death. So there's reasonable funding for early career researchers and researchers that have established their careers decades ago. There's funding that they would be competitive for. But in the middle, so for my career stage, the mid-career researcher, it's really hard to get any funding because you're not quite competitive enough to compete with the more senior researchers, and you've already passed the career stage where you'd be competitive for more early career funding. So I think having an institute fundraiser like the Bright Walk, which could be used to give seed funding to mid-career researchers like me, which would allow us to do a small sort of pilot study that would get preliminary data that would then make us more competitive for the larger national grants. I think it's really important.
So it could be that real leg up for someone who's a mid-career researcher who has what it takes to do a lot more good but needs to find some money somewhere to further their work. Yeah,
definitely. And it's sort of like succession planning because the more senior researchers are going to retire at some stage and the mid-career researchers will have to move up. And if we haven't been able to establish our own research programs, establish our own track record of funding and publications, like it's kind of, there won't be anyone to take over.
And you can't do that alone.
No.
So what makes it all worth it for you?
What makes research all worth it for me? Knowing that I'm discovering something and I could be the first person in the world to know that, it just gives you like just a feeling inside that I can't really describe. It makes the stress, the fatigue, the sacrifice, it does make it worth it. And knowing that my research can be used to help small children with a really devastating disease, that just is what really lights the fire within me.
Well, thank you for sticking at it because the world needs more people like you.
No worries.
If you want to learn more about Sahmri and the researchers working to build a brighter, healthier future for you and your family, head to sahmri.org.au.
It is a passion of mine. It's something that I feel really strongly about. I enjoy what I do. Yeah, I get to wake up and enjoy my job. And I don't think that's something that the majority of people would say. I was with my research assistant. So yeah, I showed her and she's like, "What?" and had the same reaction as me. And then it's just that like wave of excitement that comes over you and you think, hang on, I've like discovered something important that's going to help patients.
Few people get to experience creating something like that that's going to potentially impact all of humanity in a really positive way.